of Andrew Mitchell. And on the line from Tees, our studio there, is Mike Pannett, former Metropolitan Police officer. So, David Davis, you've been backing Andrew Mitchell in all of this, and it is going your way at the moment, it has to be said.
Yeah, at the moment. I mean, one has to say this is not actually a political campaign with a sort of victory at the end of it. It's about justice, frankly, about justice being done. And as Carol said, Andrew Mitchell's case is not even the tip of the iceberg. It's not even a snowball on the iceberg, because you've got to remember that you've got Hillsborough, you've got the G20 episode, you've got the Jean-Charles de Menezes episode. In all of these, the police accounts were either meddled with or tampered or just wrong. The courts have found that. And the problem here is less about Andrew than about the fact that we've got a fantastic police force generally. Most of the people who are serving the police do that for the right reasons, do a good job, but there's always a small number of bad apples. And the question is, are we able to deal with those bad apples? Are the police themselves able to deal with those bad apples? Yesterday, the deputy chairman of the Independent Police Complaints Commission, completely independent of all this, said these people should have been charged with gross misconduct, not just misconduct.
They could be fired for that.
They could be fired for that. Very big difference, of course. All the other things carry a warning, but that carries firing. And she said that. So very serious. So I think it's a big issue. Frankly, not because of Andrew. I mean, the comment, what chance the kid on the street? Andrew's got people around him who can who can invest a year in this stuff and sort of sort it out and sift through it and do the forensics and get the CCTV and all that sort of stuff. If you're just an ordinary citizen who's not got all of that, and this happens to you, what do you do then?
Mike Pannett, that's a very good point, isn't it? That if this is what happens to, as David Davis says, the kid on the street, they can't bring in 5 MPs to help them.
Look, I think we need to take this back a little bit, and I've listened to what David Davis has had to say there, and quite right. We want to have, I believe we've got the best police service in the world, and occasionally there are the odd bad apple, but I think what's not been helpful here is we've thrown everything at policing, bar but the kitchen sink that's gone wrong over the last 3 decades. And, I've been fielding questions last week at the very time when police officers were lining up getting bravery awards from the Prime Minister, all that went wrong with the Lawrence inquiry, that the entire Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist, and then we all, bringing up Hillsborough again, and I'm getting police officers up and down the country who are absolutely devastated.
Just let me ask you about one thing, Mike, about this case. When these 3 officers came out of the meeting with Andrew Mitchell and misrepresented what he said, they said he continues to deny what was in the police log, as if the police log is Bible. Well, and now, as a result of this, we know that we're pretty sure that what was in the police log was not true. Now, just an ordinary citizen like me, that's a shock,
I think,
to know that it could be made up.
Do you know what? I think the entire British public, me included, I think this is Plebgate take 25. What we've got to do is look at, will we ever find out what actually happened at those gates at number 10 when there was an altercation? Who knows? But,
probably.
The officers in question, there's several strands to this, as has been pointed out. There's the original officers who weren't, they haven't been arrested, and obviously this will all come out in the inquiry next week. And what about their integrity? They've served on those gates for years without any issue whatsoever of this kind. But then there is a separate issue of what went on following that, which has been investigated, in my view, a rogue officer, and let's get that out. We don't want any of that. And then there's this issue in the West Midlands, and in my case, at the time I thought this is a very, very bad idea. There was, don't forget, about a year ago...
You mean people campaigning against the government?
Absolutely.
In police uniforms, essentially?
Well, absolutely. I didn't think that was the best thing to have done at the time.
Let me put that to... Hang on, let me just bring David back in there. Is one of the problems for you, David Davis, that the Police Federation essentially used this whole pleb thing to campaign against the Conservative Party? Is that what it is?
Well, that's not by itself. That accelerated the pressure on Andrew, and it led him to resign, I think, at the end of the day. But the more important to me is it's not one, Mike, as it said, one bad officer. There are actually a number of officers were arrested. At least one we know basically masqueraded as civilian, put in a completely bogus witness statement. A bogus report email. Another person was bogus and was arrested. So the whole series.
We'll let the courts decide on that.
Exactly, but I wasn't going to name them. But the whole series of things happened. 8 people arrested. Now, some of them may be innocent, but 8 people arrested. This is quite a big and complicated problem.
Hang on. As Mike said, the person who wrote the word pleb down in the duty log, as I understand, has not been arrested.
Not that I'm aware of.
Which is exactly my point,
gentlemen. So you think that could still be true?
Well, look, let's be right about it. This is for the public watching, for me looking on at this. You think to yourself, goodness me, this could have been handled so much better. It really, really could have done. But here we are. Several hundreds of thousands of pounds later, chief constables being wheeled out, 3 officers being put in front of the...
Could have been handled better, David.
But Mike, that is precisely my point. When the Met investigated the events in Downing Street, they interviewed hundreds of DPG officers. The vast majority of them could have had nothing to do with it. And what a waste of time and money.
Absolutely.
Spinning this out. This should have been dealt with in a month or 2.
But David,
and dealt with robustly in a month or 2.
David,
let me finish, Mike.
Hang on, Mike.
Quite important. That's the problem. The core, one of the biggest problems at the core of all this is whether or not the police can investigate themselves. What we saw yesterday with the West Midlands, Warwick and West Mercia police forces was a demonstration they can't. And I'm afraid, I don't want to say too much about the Met investigation because it's still to report. But my impression of it so far has been too slow, too ponderous, and not focused on the right issues in the right way.
Mike,
We'll see next week.
You can't, or the police can't investigate themselves. Just answer that.
Well, it's a very difficult one because what you've got to remember, when a police officer's up for misconduct or complaints made against them, and don't forget, police officers are dealing with people who, let's say, don't like them in very difficult circumstances. It's in a police complaint matter. It's not like being in court, a Crown Court, where you've got to prove all beyond all reasonable doubt. It's a much less for police officers. Is it reasonable or is it likely that it's happened? So a lot of police officers get a lot of false allegations against them. So these things need to be absolutely looked into very, very carefully. But the one last thing I would like to say is it took Andrew Mitchell a number of weeks to say what he did say, and I really hope, will we ever find out what was said at those gates? I don't think we will.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mike Pannett, former Metropolitan Police Officer, and David Davis, Conservative MP, friend of Andrew Mitchell. What do you think of this Plebgate thing?